The most powerful stories often come from those who remain nameless. We give a voice to the anonymous and a face to the forgotten in our latest series of emotional dramas. Subscribe today and help us tell the stories that matter.
I sent the email at 6:14 on a Tuesday morning. I know the exact time because I was already at my desk. I'd been there since 5:30, finishing the quarterly close for a client whose CFO had been breathing down my neck since January. My coffee was cold. I hadn't eaten. Outside the window of our home office, the one we'd converted from the guest bedroom when he started his MBA program. The Chicago sky was still dark. My phone buzzed with the email notification before my laptop even loaded it. I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was the client again, another passive-aggressive follow-up disguised as a question. But the subject line said, Saturday, and his name was in the sender field, and I thought maybe he was finally telling me what time his study group was ending so I could plan dinner. I opened it. I've been thinking a lot about what you said last week. You're right, what we have is different. She makes me feel like I'm actually interesting again. Like I have something to offer beyond just being someone's husband. I don't know how to explain it except to say she sees me in a way I haven't been seen in a long time. I know this is complicated. I know there's no clean answer. But I can't keep pretending I'm not feeling what I'm feeling. I read it 3 times, then I looked at the recipient field. He had meant to send it to her. He sent it to me. I sat very still for a moment. The heat kicked on somewhere in the house. I could hear it clicking through the vents. I set my phone down on the desk, face up, and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought, so that's what the ceiling. And I thought, so that's what this has been. I should back up. My husband and I met 11 years ago at a work conference in Minneapolis. I was 27, newly promoted to senior associate at the accounting firm, feeling like I had finally started becoming who I was supposed to be. He was 30, funny in a way that snuck up on you. The kind of man who remembered small details, what you'd ordered the first time you went somewhere, what you'd said offhandedly 6 months ago. I fell for that. The remembering. It felt like being known. We got married 4 years later in a small ceremony in Evanston. My mother cried. His father gave a toast that was mostly about the Cubs. We bought a 2-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park, then a house in Oak Park when I made partner. That last part matters. I made partner. He was still finishing his MBA that year, a program he'd started at 40, after deciding that his career in project management needed a reinvention, his word. And the tuition was $46,000 a year plus books, travel for case competitions, alumni events in cities I never went to because I was working. I paid for all of it. Not as a sacrifice, not as a transaction. Because I loved him and I believed in what he was building. The house was in my name. Everything was in my name. At the time, he'd asked me to do it that way because he had some outstanding debt from before we met and didn't want it complicating the mortgage. I hadn't thought twice about it. I'm thinking about it now. The study group started 8 months ago. That's when I first noticed the shift. He'd come home later or leave earlier or be on his phone in rooms I wasn't in. When I asked about it, he said the cohort was intense, the final year projects were demanding. People were already competing for positions. He seemed energized in a way he hadn't in years, and I remember feeling relieved. I thought, good. He's finding his footing. I worked more. I always work more. I always work more. That's the thing about being a partner at a mid-sized accounting firm in a city like Chicago. There is always more work. I told myself we were both just busy, that this was a season, that we'd come up for air in the spring. He stopped asking about my days around November. I noticed, but I told myself I was probably doing the same. I told myself married people settle into silences sometimes, and that silence doesn't always mean distance. I was wrong about that. The morning I got the email, I didn't call him. He was asleep upstairs. He had a late class the night before, and I'd already been awake for an hour when he got home. I heard him come in, heard him move around the kitchen, heard him go upstairs. I stayed at my desk. We didn't speak. Now I sat at that same desk and I read his email again, and I made a list. Not an emotional list. A practical one. I'm an accountant. When things fall apart, I inventory. The house, mine. Both cars, mine, both loans in my name. The joint checking account, I contributed 80% of everything that had ever gone into it. His tuition, paid from my earnings, not joint funds. His graduation ceremony, 3 weeks away. I transferred the balance of the joint account into my personal account before 7 a.m. Not all of it. I'm not vindictive, but enough. My half plus what I put in last month for the mortgage. What remained was proportional to what he'd contributed. I kept the receipts. I always keep the receipts. Then I called a locksmith. In Chicago, you can get someone there same day if you call early enough and offer to pay the emergency rate. I offered. I went upstairs. He was asleep. I looked at him for a moment, just looked, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not grief, something quieter than both of those. A kind of settling, like when a long calculation finally balances. I went back downstairs and I got ready for work. He called at 11:17. I was in a client meeting and I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 11:42, again at noon. I stepped out of the conference room on the third call and answered. "Did you?" he started. "I got your email," I said. Silence. "It was meant for, I know who it was meant for." He started to say something about how it wasn't what it looked like, which was remarkable, I thought, given that emails are literally just words, and the words had been extremely clear. I let him finish. I've always been good at letting people finish. Then I said, "I've had the locks changed. Your key won't work when you get home. I've left 2 boxes of your immediate things on the front porch. The rest we can arrange through someone else. You can't just, the house is in my name," I said. "I can." He said my name. Once quietly the way he used to say it when he was about to say something he thought I'd find difficult to hear. "Don't," I said, and I went back into the conference room. I want to be honest about what the next few weeks were like, because I've heard these stories told as if the woman who leaves walks out the door and immediately starts glowing. As if the moment you make the right decision, the pain evaporates. That's not how it works. I would wake up at 3 in the morning and reach to my left side out of habit and feel the absence there, and my chest would do something awful. I'd get up and make tea and stand in my kitchen that was entirely my kitchen now, and think, 11 years. I'd think about the conference in Minneapolis. I'd think about his father's toast about the Cubs. I'd think about how he used to remember things. I cried at my desk once. I waited until everyone had left the floor, and then I sat in my chair and I let myself do it for exactly as long as I needed to, and then I washed my face in the bathroom, and I went home. The grief is real. I'm not going to skip over it like it didn't happen. It happened. But here is what else happened. My colleague, a woman who's been at the firm longer than anyone and who had said exactly 4 personal things to me in 3 years, stopped by my office in the second week and set a coffee on my desk without asking. She said, "I know something's going on. You don't have to tell me, but you're doing fine." And then she left. I think about that a lot. You don't have to tell me, but you're doing fine. My sister drove up from Indianapolis that first weekend and we ordered Thai food and sat on my living room floor and she let me talk for 4 hours without once telling me what I should have done differently, which is the greatest gift anyone gave me during that time. She just listened. She said, "You built everything you have. He couldn't take it even if he tried." And then she fell asleep on my couch and I covered her with a blanket. And I felt, for the first time in weeks, something close to okay. He tried, of course. There were 42 messages over the first 10 days. I counted. A few were apologetic. A few were angry. Apparently my calmness read as cruelty to him, which I found interesting. Several mentioned that I was being extreme. One said, "You're doing this because you're hurt, not because you actually want this." That one I read twice. Then I deleted them all and set up a filter so his messages would route directly to a folder I didn't have to look at. I did not respond to a single one. His mother called me. She was not unkind. She'd always been decent to me, but she asked if there was any room for conversation, any chance of working through it. I told her I appreciated her calling and that I wished her son well, and that I didn't have anything more to say on the subject. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "You've always been the steady one." I thanked her. We hung up. The graduation ceremony came and went. I didn't go. I had a client presentation that morning. I sent him a card, plain white, and inside I wrote, "Congratulations on finishing." I mean that, because I did mean it. I had paid for that degree and I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't. I've thought a lot about the email itself, about the words he used. She sees me in a way I haven't been seen in a long time. I've turned this over and over. What I've landed on is this. I did see him. I saw exactly who he was, a man who needed to feel exceptional, who grew quieter as I grew more capable, who started to interpret my competence as a kind of judgment. I saw all of that. I made room for it. I paid for a degree so he could feel like himself again. What he meant, I think, was that she reflected back the version of himself he wanted to believe in. That's not the same as being seen, that's being mirrored, and mirrors are easy. Anyone can be a mirror. Seeing someone, really seeing them, the whole of them, not just the flattering parts, that's harder. That's what I had done. He just hadn't wanted the view. 6 months after I changed the locks, my firm offered me a position on the leadership committee. It's not a title change exactly, I'm still a partner, but it means a seat at the table where the firm's direction gets decided. It means my opinion shapes how things are done. It means I had built enough, earned enough, demonstrated enough, that even in a year when my personal life had quietly collapsed, my professional standing had not moved an inch. I sat with the offer letter in my office after everyone had gone home, and I thought about the version of myself from that Tuesday morning in February. Cold coffee, dark sky, a phone in my hand, reading words that weren't meant for me. I thought about that woman and what she deserved. She deserved this. She had been working toward this for years. I signed the letter. I sold the house in Oak Park last fall. It was practical. It was a large house, designed for a life I was no longer living. But it was also intentional. I wanted to choose where I lived, not just keep living where I'd ended up. I bought a condo in the West Loop. High floor. The kind of windows that make the city look like it belongs to you. I have a home office again, but this one has a door that locks from the inside, and I bought the desk myself, and the coffee machine is the good one I'd always wanted and never justified. My mornings are different now. I wake up before the alarm and I sit with my coffee while the city comes on outside the window, and I think about the day ahead, not the day I have to get through. The day I get to have. I heard through someone who knows someone that his relationship with the woman from his study group lasted 4 months. That when it ended, he moved into a 1-bedroom in Wicker Park, that he reached out to 2 mutual friends asking if I seemed open to talking. Both of those friends told me. I appreciated that. I didn't reach out, not out of bitterness. I want to be clear about that. It simply no longer felt necessary. The same way you don't go back to a restaurant that gave you food poisoning, not even to explain to them what they did wrong. You just don't go back. You find somewhere better. You move on. People ask me sometimes, friends, my sister, once a woman I just met at a work dinner who had too much wine and a look in her eyes I recognized. Whether I regret how I handled it, whether I was too fast, too cold, whether I should have tried. I understand why they ask. We're taught that marriage is something you fight for, that leaving without screaming or begging or giving someone another chance is somehow a failure of feeling. That if you loved someone and you let them go quietly, you must not have loved them enough. I loved him enough. I loved him completely for years, with my whole practical, unsentimental heart. I paid for his future with mine. I made space for his growth inside the structure I had built. What I refused to do was wait, because the moment I read that email, I understood something clearly. He had already made his choice. Not in that moment. That moment was just when I found out. He had made the choice weeks or months before, probably in whatever small daily decisions had led him to a woman who made him feel seen. He had already left. He had already decided that what we had was no longer enough. And if he had already decided that, then my job was not to argue. My job was to believe him, so I did. The city is loud on the high floor in winter. The wind comes off the lake and you can hear it against the glass. This low, insistent sound, like something trying to get in. I make my coffee. I open my laptop. I look out at the buildings going gold in the early light. 11 years, 42 messages, 1 email sent to the wrong person. I don't think about him the way I thought I would. Some mornings I don't think about him at all. That used to surprise me. It doesn't anymore. I think about the woman who sat at a desk at 5:30 in the morning and worked while he slept, who paid for the degree he used to feel interesting, who made herself smaller in ways she didn't notice until she finally had room to expand. I think about her. I'm proud of her. She didn't fall apart. She just finally, quietly stopped waiting for someone who had already gone. I've thought about what I would tell someone who finds themselves sitting at a desk before sunrise, reading words that weren't meant for them, feeling the floor shift under everything they thought was solid. I don't have a tidy answer. But I have an honest one. What happened to me wasn't just a betrayal. It was a reckoning. And reckonings, I've learned, don't arrive from nowhere. They're built, slowly, out of every small choice both people made over a long time. He chose to let the distance grow instead of naming it. I chose to keep working harder instead of asking what was wrong. Neither of us was entirely innocent. The difference is that I was willing to look at that clearly, and he wasn't. That's the thing about cause and effect that nobody talks about in polite company. It doesn't care whether you meant for something to happen. It doesn't soften outcomes because your intentions were good. I spent years assuming that if I kept showing up, kept working, kept building, kept making room, the marriage would hold. I was doing the right things, but I was doing them quietly, without ever asking if we were still headed in the same direction. That silence had a cost. I just didn't know yet what currency it would collect in. The morning I read that email, I made a choice about who I was going to be from that point forward. Not who I was going to be to him, that part was already over. I mean who I was going to be to myself. And the person I chose to be was someone who didn't negotiate with a decision that had already been made, someone who didn't mistake her own grief for weakness, someone who understood that the most dignified thing she could do was believe him the first time. That took something. I won't pretend it didn't. There's a version of strength that looks like fighting, that looks like arguing and crying and demanding explanations. And there's another version that looks like going back into the conference room. I chose the second one, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I knew that what I felt needed to be protected, not performed. Robin showing up that morning with coffee and saying you're doing fine without asking for the story. That mattered more than she knows. My sister driving 4 hours and sitting on my floor and just listening, that mattered. The people who held space for me without trying to fix me or rush me or tell me what I should have done differently. I think that's what real support looks like. It doesn't explain the pain away. It just stays near it. What I know now, 2 years out, is that I didn't lose my life when that marriage ended. I lost the version of my life that had been slowly shrinking to accommodate someone who had already started to leave. The condo I bought, the seat I earned at that table, the mornings I have now. Those aren't consolation prizes. They're what was always waiting on the other side of the decision I was afraid to make. I didn't rebuild. I just finally had enough room to finish building what I'd already started. And that, I think, is what it means to know your own worth. Not as a feeling, not as a slogan, but as something you demonstrate to yourself, quietly, every single day, whether anyone is watching or not.